Rotting, sticky, and downright smelly materials are usually the things gardeners rush to throw away. Yet these are often the exact materials worms value more than perfectly finished compost. If you're serious about soil building and want faster, richer castings, this is one of those uncomfortable truths that changes how you garden. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to Evergreen Garden, drop a comment below with your worm bin setup or questions, and share this with another gardener who still thinks compost must look clean to be useful. Why worms prefer rot over finished compost comes down to biology, not aesthetics. Earthworms do not eat food scraps or compost directly. What they consume are the microbes that explode in population as organic matter breaks down. When materials become slimy, sour-smelling, and partially decomposed, bacteria and fungi are at their peak. That microbial bloom is a buffet for worms. Finished compost, while excellent for soil, is often too stable and biologically quiet to drive rapid worm reproduction or casting production. This is why bins fed with slightly rotted inputs outperform bins fed with dry, aged compost. Understanding what worm-loved rot actually looks like helps avoid common mistakes. The material should be soft, collapsing and darkening, with a smell closer to sour fermentation than sharp rot. A mild ammonia or silage-like odor is acceptable, while a putrid, sewer-like smell means anaerobic conditions have gone too far. Kitchen scraps left to pre-rot for 5 to 7 days in a sealed container usually reach the ideal stage. In warm climates, 3 to 4 days is often enough. The goal is partial breakdown, not liquefaction. Balancing wet, sticky waste with bedding keeps the system productive instead of messy. Worms thrive when moisture stays around 70 to 80%, but slimy inputs can easily push bins into waterlogged territory. For every 1 part by volume of wet, rotting food waste, add 2 parts dry carbon bedding such as shredded cardboard, egg cartons, dried leaves, or aged sawdust. If you're feeding 1 kilogram of pre-rotted scraps, match it with roughly 2 handfuls of fluffed dry bedding. This ratio prevents compaction, absorbs excess liquid, and creates air pockets that keep microbes aerobic. Fermented waste often outperforms traditional compost as worm feed when applied correctly. Materials like bokashi-treated scraps, sour fruit waste, or vegetable pulp from juices break down rapidly once buried in bedding. The key is dilution and placement. Never dump fermented material directly onto worms. Instead, dig a shallow trench, place a thin layer of fermented waste no thicker than 2 centimeters, then fully cover it with bedding. Within 48 hours, worms usually swarm the area as microbial activity spikes and acidity stabilizes. Manure provides one of the best real-world examples of why worms love nasty material. Fresh manure is too hot and can burn worms, but aged manure that has heated, cooled, and begun to soften is prime feedstock. Cow and horse manure, aged for 2 to 4 weeks, works exceptionally well. Just mix 1 part aged manure with 1 part shredded cardboard before adding it to the bin. Poultry manure, though, must be composted for at least 6 to 8 weeks, and you'll want to use it sparingly, at a ratio closer to 1 part manure to 3 parts bedding because of its high nitrogen content. Managing smell is, honestly, less about eliminating rot and more about controlling airflow and moisture. A worm bin that smells bad is almost always compacted or too wet. Fluffing the bedding weekly and adding dry carbon immediately when odors appear, well, that solves most problems. And don't forget to drain excess leachate if liquid collects at the bottom. Worm-friendly rot smells earthy or tangy, never suffocating. If worms are climbing the walls, conditions are off and adjustments are needed quickly. Using this approach in garden beds honestly multiplies its benefits beyond the worm bin. Pre-rotted organic matter mixed with worm castings creates a biologically charged soil amendment. A practical ratio for garden application is 1 part worm castings to 3 parts soil or compost, blended with a small amount of partially decomposed organic matter. This mix, you'll find, jumpstarts microbial life around plant roots and improves nutrient availability faster than castings alone. Experienced gardeners often notice faster worm reproduction when feeding pre-rotted materials consistently. Cocoons increase, juvenile worms appear sooner, and castings become darker and finer. This is not coincidence. Microbial density drives worm health, and rot is where microbes thrive. The discomfort gardeners feel towards sticky, smelly inputs is cultural, not biological. Rot is not failure, it is transition. When managed with intention, it becomes one of the most powerful tools in soil regeneration. Worms understand this instinctively. Once gardeners accept it, worm bins become more productive, gardens become more resilient, and waste turns into value at a faster rate. If this guide helped you rethink compost and worm feeding, subscribe to Evergreen Garden for more practical, experience-based gardening content. Share this with a fellow gardener who's struggling with slow worm bins, and leave a comment below with what you're feeding your worms right now.